The only guarantee we have is that people in the organization who understand that we are kind of reaching the point of no return would raise their hands and say, hey, this is not right. And therefore, let's step back and rethink what we're doing. And that, to me, is the critical part of the leadership, especially in the global context.
Welcome to our listeners to the 5th episode of the Optimal Leadership Podcast. My guest today is Professor Vlado Pucik. He's one of the world's leading thinkers on global leadership, executive development, and organizational transformation. Over many years, Vlado has worked with CEOs across cultures and industries. He's helped leaders to navigate complexity, uncertainty, and rapid change. Today, we're together exploring three themes that are central to optimal leadership. So is it listening in unfamiliar environments, balancing digital visibility with genuine human connection, and leading effectively with external stakeholders, including regulators. So welcome, Vlado.
Thank you.
Begin with the first theme that I'd like to discuss with you today, Vlado. It's the one about essentially learning to listen, leading in unfamiliar environments. Now, both of us have spent much of our careers operating outside our home environments. But one thing that I've learned through this time is that it's the unfamiliarity that naturally forces humility, and the humility itself forces listening. So Stephen Covey was famous for saying that most people do not listen with the intent of understanding, they listen with the intent of replying. And that of course, feels very dangerous for senior leaders. You've worked with leaders from across the world in different cultures over decades. What's your view, Vlado? Do you think CEOs are underestimating how much leadership effectiveness depends upon the quality of their listening?
Yeah, well, I would kind of take it a little bit farther. I would say not just the CEOs. I think it goes through the whole organization. In a way, if the CEO doesn't develop appropriate listening and learning skills, which goes with it, it's too late. By the time he or she reaches the position, probably too late.
Right. Okay.
So that would be my concern. If we are thinking about leadership development, executive development, do we provide the right exposure to the future generation of leaders to develop those listening and learning skills as they progress in their careers? It's not just the CEO appointment kind of changes the mindset and changes the approach. In fact, usually when people say, hey, it worked for me, I am now here at the seat I aspire to, so why should I change now? Just because now I have a global scope, it's too late.
So my follow-on question, given the confidence that maybe being appointed to a CEO position can give a leader, is does global leadership make executives more curious? Does it simply reveal to us how little we actually know? And how does that fit with CEOs maybe naturally feeling confident when they're given the position?
I think you articulated well. It's both, yeah? It's both the curiosity, because obviously it's very difficult to be an effective global leader if you don't appreciate the scope of what you're observing. If you look at being global in terms of the strain of never-ending travel and time lags and confusion, without appreciating the learning benefits of it, it's tough. Yeah. So you basically have to come to it with the fact that this is something which enhances kind of individual thinking agility. And once you get in that right mode, that of course creates this feel for continuous exploration, enjoyment of the exploration, and finding out that after, in a way, every discussion you have, there's something new you could have learned. And you benefit from it, and you bring back to the next round of the discussion. It's kind of a never-ending cycle of enjoyment of learning new interpretation. What I would call the the power of critical global thinking. And that's a habit.
It's great to hear you using the word enjoyment a couple of times here, Vlado, because sometimes we can forget to enjoy the journey. You've talked about ability, and also yeah. While we're discussing communication, I mean these are difficult things for maybe for CEOs to learn new skills, because they're typically already experienced by the time they get the job. Are there any practical tips you can give based on good experiences you've seen that will help CEOs, especially in the unfamiliar environments, not just to continue to be good communicators, which many of them are, but to be more effective listeners?
Well, again, I would push back a little bit here. I think the first thing I would say, okay, I will take for granted that you, Mr. or Mrs. CEO, are in the positions, you have established yourself with the great leadership skills. What are you doing now to make sure that your successors will exhibit the same skills? That's, in fact, effectively their key responsibility. Make sure that the leadership in the organization is sustained. And so I don't want to kind of tell them you need to change or you need to do this or that, but just remember why you're here, how did you get here, and how to make sure that your successor will be equally well equipped, because no one will be in that position forever. And what we see continuously is that how difficult the leadership succession actually is. And, how many companies have a record of sustainable leadership succession?
Yeah, and there's maybe an irony here, Vlado, given that we all know that CEO tenures tend to be relatively short, particularly in the context of career spans, and yet the succession, the planning for the inevitable, it often falls short.
Yeah. And if you kind of say you could push it farther, you said, why does it really matter who is CEO if the organization is strong on overall leadership? One person right now being picked up to the role, something might happen. Given the situation we're all facing in, well, the next person will step in and continue the journey.
Yeah.
That's basically what it is. But for me, the most important thing is, if you partly reflect on the global leadership, but I think it's a broader issue, is the responsibility the leaders have to promote critical thinking in the organization. And I would also call for more emphasis on protecting freedom of speech. And what I mean here is that, my life story, I grew up in behind the Iron Curtain. And for us, of course, the freedom of speech was something which we aspired to. And then when I moved to the other side, I was, well, that's fine. I mean, that's absolutely essential for our society. But don't bring it to the corporation, because business is business. And business is about execution. And then you learn that actually maybe it's the same. Every time you look at a major organizational issue, which then results in the destruction of shareholder value or CEO's removal, etc., it's not that people in the organization did not know that something was not happening right. It's not the CEO or the chief financial officer sneaking into the office late at night, changing the spreadsheets. Okay, so the results look better. No, there's institutional arrangements which people do, but that's actually not my job to intervene. Or if I say something, then something bad can happen, and I might not get my promotion, I might not get my bonus. My senior guys is not saying anything. Why should I say that? And especially today, where we have learned that nobody kind of has their place guaranteed. It would be too big to fail. There are not so many companies left in that category, too big to fail.
Right.
And if you fail, you can fail pretty far. And the only guarantee we have is that people in the organization who understand that we are kind of reaching the point of no return would raise their hands and say, hey, this is not right. we're doing something which we said we should not be doing, or we're exploring areas which we said we should avoid, and therefore let's step back and rethink what we're doing. And that's, to me, especially today, is the critical part of the leadership, especially in the global context, because in a global company, it's easier to kind of avoid responsibility because, we're just in the far distant subsidiary and we see something which we should not be doing. Yes, it does contradict our code of conduct, but everybody above me knows about it. So why should I be the one raising that? And that's a problem. And for me, the role of the CEO is to keep coming back and encouraging people to speak up. And that's not easy because the communication style is very different. How people respond to challenging questions, inquisitive questions. Some CEOs are used to and expect, look, I challenge you and you challenge me. Yeah? And we have good dialogue and everything is fine. I remember, we were working together in a company on a training program, and the CEO would come in and provide feedback on the project teams, and he beat them up. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember.
And when I challenged him on that, but these are my people. They're used to being challenged. I said, well, some of them are your people, and they are used to being challenged. But each team has one person who worked for you, and the 4 others who saw you first time in their life, and they were absolutely terrified.
Yeah. So it's not just about the freedom to speak, but the safety to speak.
The context in which you speak and encouragement to speak, and that does require the cultural sensitivity. And that's where the art of listening comes in too, because you have to show that you're ready you expect people to speak up, but you're ready to accept the way they speak, and you manage the feedback accordingly. Because that's very important. How to encourage people to speak up.
Yeah, and you're mentioning the importance of listening, and I guess there are different types of listening, and I know you've talked a lot about this in the past. The listening to fix, listening to win, listening to learn. Can you say a little bit more about these different types of listening and the importance of all of them for the leader?
For me, the critical one is the listening to learn, because in a way, I listen because it benefits me. I'm very selfish.
Right.
I'm getting employees giving me a free class on something which I did not know before, or a customer or regulator or whoever we talked about. Is this interaction which either initiated or initiated by them, but it gives me a benefit of new knowledge, which I would not have otherwise. Yeah, of course, sometimes you have a conversation you initiate because there is a problem to resolve. But again, it's you trying to find out what are the different perspectives coming in and then manage it accordingly. I think it looks the same if you just listen to the conversation, but the context, of course, is different, and the reactions are different. People kind of observe you and say, what happens when I provide certain kind of information, learning feedback? What will happen next? Yeah.
Yeah. No, that.
And if people see they being recognized for bringing in information, important information, that helps. And of course, there are some people who I wouldn't say abuse, but in a way are hard to stop. We all know, we have seen them. But again, it's important to understand that that's part of the total package, and you just need to manage with sensitivity to make sure that other people don't see that as a wrong signal.
Yeah. That reminds me, Vlado, of one of the ideas that I've always associated with your work, and that's that the most effective global leaders are not the ones that have all the answers to the questions, but they're the ones who are most able, most capable of learning in unfamiliar environments. And so you'd see this agility and learning agility as being more important than expertise. Yeah.
And then it also links to the fact that we have kind of defined and we see leadership as making decisions.
Mm.
And the alternative way to think about leadership, about mobilizing people.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe the decisions were formulated elsewhere. But in my role is to make sure the organization is now aligned and implement and execute what we decided to. And that cannot be replaced. I can delegate decision making in a sense of providing the answers. It doesn't need to be me. It could be the most competent person in the department or in the division or in the company on this particular topic, which I would defer to because they have the expertise. But I cannot delegate mobilizing people.
Right. Okay.
That's my job as a CEO. I need to then come in and step in and say, okay, we have discussed, we have collectively or individually made the decision. So what do we need to do now to make it happen?
So, Vlado, you make it sound so obvious and so easy that leaders maybe don't need to have the expertise. In fact, often it's the people who are closest to doing the work that have the expertise. So, why is it that so many successful leaders find it so hard to listen to their teams?
Well, I would say part of it's the environment, which pushes us to spend time effectively. And if you think you know the answer, so why should I listen to another round of conversations when I already know where we want to go? Or maybe, truly fact that this is the third time we go about and I know who is going to say what. So we just go and move on. Mm-hmm. We've been all of those situations. But at the end is kind of manage the time in a way that there is still, despite all the challenges of time, a space to open up. Mm-hmm. Because that defines the atmosphere in the organization. And if we start cutting out on that, then it spreads throughout the organization, become a disease. The boss is not listening, why should I listen? And then, of course, then my people will not listen because, hey, we're too busy, we don't have time.
Right.
What's going on with it? And in a way, there's nothing I can do. I can get more resources for my people somehow. I can raise capital. Resources are challenging, but they are manageable. One thing is not manageable is time. I cannot give you more time. Still 24/7, 365 days. But I cannot give you 400 or 25/7 or 25/8. I cannot do that. So I need to make sure that the time is spent effectively on some of these important priorities. And that's where, for example, that you have a conversation with leaders at L level, and they all say, yeah, we agree. We need to have a dialogue. We need to listen. But I don't have the time. We have to move.
Yeah. And in my experience, often the time that gets wasted on maybe other things is often the source of that wastage can be traced back to the CEO, to the leader of the organization, both in terms of how they're spending their own time and how they're assuming and that others should be using the organization's time.
And the bureaucracy which goes with it. I mean, bureaucracy not just in kind of the paperwork, but unnecessary meetings and interactions.
Yeah. So the time is there if we use it. If we use it
effectively, and if we start kind of comparing what we do with what we should be doing, as we talked earlier, with kind of links to the second thing we were discussing about the social media and interaction. I mean, we have learned that extensive social media use is not good for adolescent children. Yeah, I mean, it's extensive acknowledgement. So why is it okay for CEOs?
Yeah, yeah. And so is
CEOs
it a
better equipped to handle it than the adolescents? I'm not so convinced. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So maybe you can answer that one. How how important is social media in a for CEOs in a world where somehow there seems to be an expectation of communicating consistently, both internally and externally.
Well, I think so. If it depends, there is a social media and there is a communication technology.
Right.
And I would say we overestimate social media and we underestimate communication technology.
Mm.
Uh,
Right.
which communication technology would be having small team to discuss in real time real issues
Mm.
and the benefit. Okay, because face to face today it's more available than it ever was before. I would still argue that my generation, I would still find it difficult to build trust without real face to face interactions,
Mm.
without the technology. I am willing to accept that the next generation have no problem establish trust based virtual communication, but it's still face to face,
Right.
even though the face comes across over the internet. And I would say that the technology is improving daily as we speak, and we're not taking advantage of it. And we spend more time on these various social media channels, which are not really very conducive to new learning. And we know that, and we tell children don't use it. It's distracting.
Yeah.
And then we go and spend our time managing those channels.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we believe that it's good for us. But I'm doubtful. Yeah.
Mm. Yeah, and particularly I've seen the world where CEOs may be spending a lot of time on this and then engaging other people to spend time on this on their behalf. And
Yeah, on
so
their behalf. Yeah.
sometimes we're not even sure how much the CEO is actually involved in this. And then the questions about authenticity. So what would be your advice for CEOs, leaders in order to be sure that they can be and are authentic online?
Well, I would say start small and get very comfortable with 101 or small team interactions.
Okay, right, right.
And having experts like in the background to
Yes,
say, hey, I think you should be doing this, you should be, you're not coming across, you have to watch how you act, how you behave, because you know if we are together we are more conscious of our behaviors and the impact we make. When you do it online it's a bit more difficult, so you need an external person to kind of guide you and support you. And uh, but the visibility, the intimacy
mm,
is very important, which in a lot of social media today doesn't exist by definition. Yeah, I mean,
yeah,
they're not built around intimacy. They are built around, producing likes.
yes, yes.
that that doesn't help. Yeah.
You reminded me as you were speaking about 20 years ago, and I felt that somehow uh, internal communication. It was hard even there to get the space in people's lives, my employees' lives, for them
Yeah.
to read the stuff I was putting out. But I sensed that if it appeared in the newspaper, then in public communication, then they might be more likely to read it. And
Yeah.
so I found myself using. Using the external
Mm.
media in order to get the attention, and now sort of extrapolating forward, I think there's maybe even greater temptation for leaders today to be putting things out on LinkedIn, which are actually essentially really targeted at the internal audiences.
Yeah.
And
The problem, of
what's your
course,
thoughts on
is that to some degree it's a parallel what you just described. but it doesn't generate discussions.
Right.
Okay, I don't see an employee responding to the CEO saying, I just read your post, dear sir. I think you're a little bit off balance on this one.
Yeah. Yeah.
I have not seen it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's even less likely to happen.
It's even less likely to. It's less likely to happen. It's more likely to happen, after the fact. I remember when I was working in Japan, that obviously the society, which is used to, still is, a fairly uh, oriented on relatively rigid hierarchical communication norms. At the same time, it's well understood that occasionally we relax and get a drink. And once you get a drink, you can more or less approach your boss and say certain things which otherwise you should not be saying, and the boss is not allowed to remember it.
Yeah.
And I remember being in a situation when I had a very kind of serious conversation with a manager about, substantial matters. And then he noticed the CEO is approaching, so he grabbed a glass and with the glass approached the CEO and basically berated him about some decisions he has made. And then after that, he came back to me, put down the glass, and continue a very serious conversation.
Okay. And that can definitely not be done online.
And that cannot be done online. Okay,
Yeah.
so to me, it's a kind of a metaphor for what we're trying to create, an environment in which people can express their opinions as part of the listening. And again, people are developed and trained to create an opportunity for others to feel less threatened and being able to communicate certain important issues.
What I'm hearing you saying is we need to continue to find ways for the face-to-face personal interactions, not and real personal interactions, not
Real personal interaction is, and again, especially for leaders in the global companies, it's important to put it part of their schedules when they travel to talk to people who otherwise they would not be exposed to.
Yeah, yeah. Can you give some advice, some maybe some practical tips again, things you've experienced, some good leadership examples? How
So
to,
for example, if the CEO flies to a country, and of course, so what he's going to do, he's going to meet with his leadership team, and he's going to meet with the external stakeholders, maybe participate in a public event. But then I'm saying, okay, why don't you schedule a dinner meeting with 6, 7 talented young employees and spend the time listening to them about what it is and what do they expect working in a company which you lead. Yeah, so basically 2-3 hours, just 4 or 5 layers down the line, and just take the time.
Yeah.
And that's recognition to the employees, of course. Not everybody will get invited. Some will take the opportunity, some will not take the opportunity to. But that's part of the learning process.
Yeah, yeah. You reminded me of a couple of examples of this, and I think much of our time as CEOs is spent traveling. So that's a great way to engage with the people, the colleagues who are traveling as well. Often there'll be some colleagues with us or meeting us at various points in the journey. I stumbled into this at one time where relatively junior member of staff jumped into my car as it was leaving the airport, deciding it was more efficient than making their own way into town. And of course, in that environment, I learned so much. So why have I been traveling alone? And then later on, I found just when we had the situations where having to take a jet. So well, let's fill it with staff who are also needing to get to the same place, and then we all have the captive environment where if we're on a plane together, we're going to work, and I'm going to listen. And I thought, yeah, just so much CEO travel time is the at least in my case, was the most underutilized resource.
But again, following up on that it was talking about the CEOs, reaching out. But again, it's the culture of the whole company.
Right, right.
So not me as a CEO going out to Vietnam and meeting with my team, but everyone on my team in the center, when they go out there, should be meeting up with the people who are in the line of succession in a subsidiary. And I remember a story, as I was teaching at IMD, I had a student who became a manufacturing manager for in a country for a major American company, which was 5 years later in the middle of a major leadership succession. And there were 3 contenders, everybody knew inside, competing for the job. And I approached my former students and said, well, how do you feel about the succession? Who is your favorite? And he said, well, I don't really care. I know all 3 of them. And he was 4 layers below each. But he felt that they know him because he was a talented young manager. And he was very comfortable of, that's fine. They're different, but I know all 3.
Wow.
And that means go through the organization. It means that doesn't really matter, that the integrity of the organization will be preserved because people feel that they are still included. And you have seen many cases when there is a leadership change, then the bench empties up because people move and the people who follow them move as well. And now you have leadership gaps. So to me, again, it's not just we keep talking about the CEO and how CEOs spend his or her time. It's about how do they provide an example to people in their immediate environment, more or less, behave in a similar fashion. And again, it's the connectedness and the learning and the listening and willingness to be open.
Yeah. So CEOs have a role to play as role models for other members of the leadership.
Very, very, very much so. Yeah. Sometimes it's kind of funny because the fashion in the company changes overnight with the new CEO. Preferences for dress codes or lack of it.
Yeah.
I mean, you have initiated some of those and experienced some of those in your career.
Somewhere in the first the first 3 years of a CEO role, the organization starts to look very much like the CEO.
Yeah. And then it changes again. So but the impact is clearly there. Yeah, so the modeling, hopefully in a positive way, is essential. And of course, it's more than the brand of shoes the CEO wears.
Yeah. So we've been talking a bit, Vlado, about internal management and internal engagement. So let's switch it now, perhaps to the third theme, which is the role of the organization leader, perhaps in an international environment. You'll have some strong thoughts, which I'd love to hear on this. So perhaps you let you lead here.
I think you touched a very critical point because that's probably a role which is hard to delegate. I mean, in a sense, if you're the CEO and you come to a country, that's important. Even though in your total portfolio, that country could be relatively small, but within that country, it's important. And therefore, you kind of need to carry the banner to the community, to the government, to all the other important stakeholders. And that's a very critical time which people need to invest. I mean, you have done it effectively in your organization, but you also dealt with a situation that sometimes would be hard to get the commitment from the people around you or above you to put the commitment on it, because there's only so much as, let's say, local leader you can do. Yes. Because at the end, it's the company, the senior leadership, it needs to show up, and that takes time. Yeah. And that's a part which cannot be delegated. The same with partners. I did a lot of work on managing partnership, and I always find it the critical part is to have an alignment at the senior level, making sure that certain issues can be resolved on the senior leadership team. And then when there is a trust on the senior leadership, then everything else can be resolved operationally. If there is no trust on the senior level, and that trust can only happen because of the face-to-face interaction and commonality, then it's very difficult to resolve it operationally. Because operationally, the conflicts usually be there because, the business models are different, timelines are different, priorities are different. And, for people who are managing the business on a daily basis, that creates tensions. And the bridge for the tension is the activity of the senior leadership, making sure that the glue is there, the trust is there, the communication is there. And that cannot be delegated.
How do CEOs best get the balance between managing this external world and avoiding becoming externally disconnected, where they don't know the people 4 levels down the hierarchy?
Yeah. Well, it's basically how do you the time to management is that, in a way, if you want to be very kind of straightforward about it, so you plan your visit to a subsidiary, you make sure that the external stakeholders are involved, and make sure that you touch the bottom of the organization. Everybody else can be connected online.
Yeah.
The stuff in between, we know each other, we can communicate. But the prime minister, no, you cannot do that. You have to go and see him or her. And the people at the bottom of the organization, you have to go and touch them and see them.
Okay? Yeah.
We have technology.
Something I stumbled into with, say, country visits, visiting local teams, was the value in doing it less frequently, but for longer periods, and just spending a full week with in the organization rather than just 2 or 3 days. Gave time to
absolutely, because it does take time, even for people to kind of open up, and they will remember it more, and they will remind you more when you come back. And so this is what happened when you were here last year.
Yeah, and maybe I got it through having been on the other end of the other side of the table so often. If you can spread out your visits to stakeholders over a week rather than trying to squeeze it all into a couple of days, there's far less stress.
Much stressful and easier, and you have time for more natural conversation.
Yeah.
I mean, we all been in meetings when it really became useful and interesting. You look at your watches. Thank you very much. It's a great meeting. We need to go. The schedule rather than it's a fantastic conversation we're having. So let's take a little bit more time and discuss what we need to discuss. Yeah.
And I mean, connecting this with earlier part of the conversation, now the modern communication tools should make it easier for us to find the right balance.
The right balance. Yeah. And again, it's just kind of plan it carefully, of course, how we spend the time, but travel is not avoidable. I mean, at the end of the day, we need to get out there and see the reality. Even the reality is nothing else than 3 hours in a traffic jam, because that impacts the people who are working with us. And the quality of air and the living and sustainability challenges they face daily. It's interesting to read about it in the paper, but when you're there and you experience it, you will remember. But of course, what we try to do is when we have people visiting, we try to make sure that they will not experience any of that. We put them into a bubble, and making sure their hotel will be right next to the airport. We'll go over there, maybe we have some resources. We might even arrange for a helicopter. But yes, That's convenient, but the reality, how things are done in that particular part of the world, could be very different, and they will never experience that.
I mean, and we've had the privilege, the opportunity to work in and learn from people in many different parts of the world. That would have shaped your view on what kind of capabilities CEOs need. Looking ahead over the next decade, what do you think are the capabilities that CEOs need that the business schools aren't spending enough time on teaching?
Yeah, I would say to me what's missed, which is a continuous problem, and academia is not exception to it. I still see a lack of promotion of critical thinking. I mean, critical thinking outside of the organization is rewarded and celebrated, and people become kind of new gurus because they came with some very interesting critical idea. But it doesn't work inside the organization.
Mm.
To say, look, this is an interesting proposal. Well, can we look at it from another additional perspective so we understand the context? It's not to slow the discussion down or not to make a decision, but understanding that there are probably some alternative explanations of what's going on, and are we really sure that we understand fully what's involved? So when things happen, perhaps unexpectedly, we say, yeah, I did recall we had a conversation about it 2 years ago that this can happen. So how do we react now when, of course, we could not predict, we could not kind of make the judgment at that point, but this is not new because we have raised that and we have discussed that, and we are kind of ready. And given the uncertainty around us, the kind of discipline of critical thinking, looking for alternative, it's important because that also enhances the critical thinking. Means dialogue, it means the communication, it means looking for alternative answers. Again, that all brings more learning to the organization. And again, today, and not just today, but we still have challenge of starting the discussion with okay, what are the different ways to approach the problem? What is the full portfolio? And again, I understand the pressure of getting to end results and let's move on. Action. But at the same time, what are the conditions looking at? And you see it around us in the social environment, political environment. They always ask, okay, it's kind of scary when you read today in the media, we should do this, we should do that. And then I thought, okay, now, if it doesn't work, what's the plan B? Now, I'm not saying plan A is wrong, but if it doesn't work, what is the plan B? Or C? Yeah. And we should maybe think ahead of what it could be and not be surprised that occasionally even the best plan do not work. And what do we do next? And that goes back to kind of, which it's obviously business schools cannot fix all of that, but I would say what worries me is somehow the general decline of knowledge, and I maybe use too strong word, is that because of the social media and internet and everything being instantly available, I don't need to read much. I just hit the button and I get back. I'm thinking, and here is the answer. Okay, ChatGPT did the thinking for me. And I have no idea why is this the right answer. And that, to me, it's a major challenge because people simply don't understand why I am receiving this answer. What is the thinking is in the computer, and it's probably essentially correct, but it's probably not very critical.
Yeah, we could lose the ability to think critically.
Yeah.
And maybe not create the space for it
Yeah.
and for the reflection time. Yeah.
But for the reflection time, and that's to me, obviously, you can't expect a business school to fix that because it's a generic problem.
Yeah, it's a generic problem, but I've often found it's in the business school environment when we take it away from the regular day-to-day pressures that maybe in some ways it's the easiest opportunity to step back.
Yeah. When people ask me how do you define a good business case, and my answer is it's easy to define a good business case, is which creates a situation leading to decisions about which reasonable people can disagree with. So I'm reading the case and I will say, okay, this is what, 2:00 at night, what is John supposed to do? And you said John's supposed to do that. And you said, no. Based on what I read in the case, it should be this. And the third person reads the same case and comes with a different solution. And I said, that's a good case. Because three reasonable people disagree about what's the plan. Plan A, plan B, C. And they start discussing how did we get where we are. And there are not so many cases written in that because they're difficult to teach.
Yeah. And it's you mentioned Plan C a couple of times. One of my takeaways from this is it's good to have a Plan C.
Yeah, exactly. You never know; it can be handy. Yeah.
You never know when you'll need it, and the Plan C might be the best of the three.
Out of the three.
I mean, that might be something that hasn't changed over time. But I mean, you've had so far a very long and illustrious career, Vlado. Has your definition of leadership changed at all time throughout your career?
That's an interesting question because it's, I'm more on the practical side rather than writing books about leadership per se. I'm very much focused on then the outcomes. But I would say some of the fundamentals haven't changed much in terms of what leaders do, in terms of what should be doing, which is basically motivating and mobilizing people. It's going to focus on, as you pointed out, the issues which cannot be delegated. That's an important part, and that will remain the same. And I think enjoying the benefits or the privilege of being the leader in terms of providing new opportunities to learn. Because, as you keep learning new things, discovering new things, that means you're still alive. Yeah. That's valuable. That's valuable. I mean, we are now talking here. Think about, we are all celebrating 100 years of David Attenborough. And he's too busy to celebrate because he's working on his next project. That's leadership.
Yeah. And it's clearly it's a topic and a wonderful example, and entirely consistent with what you're saying. And he's enjoying it.
He's enjoying it.
You've used this word a few times, and I think it's just such a powerful one and such an overlooked concept that CEOs also should be enjoying the work and should be seen to be enjoying it, and then they're more likely to be effective. Would you say?
Challenge is that you have so many CEOs who eventually end up enjoying the power of being CEO rather than the benefits of learning they can gain from being a CEO. To me, that's a big difference. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's
the fringe benefits which come with the jet and the applause and the likes on LinkedIn, rather than when I have great opportunity to interact with people I want. Look, I'm a CEO, so I can call up and the professors and the writers and the politicians, they'll talk to me, and they're smart and intelligent, and I can learn something from them. That's a privilege.
It is, yeah.
Not everybody has that option.
so much of the time is spent on the journey, whether it's interacting with the people, listening, learning, etc. And even for those who like the adulation that comes from having done a job well, that's such a fleeting part of it. That those brief moments at the summit, which are never really summits anyway. Then I think it's wonderful sage advice, Vlado, to enjoy the journey. To finish with, Vlado, is there any additional final piece of advice that you would give to a CEO who's starting out in the role? If there's one thing you'd like to advise to generically to any newly appointed CEO, what would it be?
Well, I would go back to the comments we made earlier. It says, begin to think, how do you make sure that your successor is as well equipped for the job as you are?
Yeah, I think always good to be ready to hand over, because we don't know which kind of a relay race this is. Is it 100 meters or 400 meters?
Exactly, until it's finished. And also that means all of that might provide new opportunities for you and for everyone.
Yeah. We can't move on to the next one if we don't have somebody coming in behind us to take on. No,
and that's but that's true everywhere. I mean, we see that in political sphere, the same kind of an issue. The lack of succession is always the indication of future paralysis, no matter how successful the leader might be. So why is it different for corporations?
Great question. Some great questions. Thanks for entertaining my questions, Vlad. I really appreciated the conversation, as always.
And of course I appreciate the again, as a round of our conversations. We had plenty of them already.
Yeah, we had many over the decades, and I believe we'll have many more in the decades to come. So, Vlado, just like to say thanks again for joining the episode 5 of the Optimal Leadership Podcast. As always, wonderful conversation with you, and thoroughly enjoyed it. Many great insights, as of course expected. Thank you, Vlado.
Well, thank you for inviting me, and I look forward to our next discussions.